I've decided when I am right about things, I think I'm going to call it out, at least when I remember that I've said something right before. Well, I just finished watching the debate, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to start this on a funny thought. After I popped into Mr. Reagan's live stream, Mr. Reagan has probably the best voice. I mean, there's several that have really good voices, but this guy is really smooth. I mean, no asthma at all. Not like me. And his shows are actually very good. He is very informative. And it sounds like this can't be real. But it turns out to be true because I've checked up on him. Just a man, and also a lot of times I already know what he's talking about before So it's like, I know this. It's good that he's talking about it. So he's a good channel, actually, Mr. Reagan. But he doesn't look like Reagan, but he's an attractive guy with a very, very nice voice. But anyway, I left, he had his live stream going, and he was reading the comments really fast. And my comment was, hey, why didn't Trump ask Biden, why don't you go ask Corn Pop how he'd deal with the racism in America? So Mr. Reagan read this, and then he busts a gut laughing. He's laughing, and then he tries to go on and read. He says, oh, that's, he said my name and complimented me. How funny it was. And then he tried to go on and continue reading the comments. And then he puts his hand over his face and said, you're amazing, Wicked Felina. And I go, oh my God, that was such a compliment. Then I quickly got a message from somebody who was on his live stream that said, Business Outside the Lines with Chuck Peavy commented, just saw Mr. Reagan quote you. He indicated he likes your work too, so he's got a taste after all, which is kind of nice. I was answering comments, so if he did say that he liked my work, of course, saying that what I wrote was amazing, he's indicating that he likes my work. I'll go over it and I'll see if he said that he's actually seen my work and likes my work. But anyway, that was funny. But China and BLM, how many times have I told you that this is the cultural, Mao called it the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. And you notice that wasn't the Squad, the Democrats tried to put forward the new way forward. It's like the Great Leap Forward. And this is the revolution, cancel culture. They're using the same terminology as China. And I have said this so many times. I said, this is communism. They're bringing us down. Well, apparently, and from the Daily Signal, this is where this comes from. And apparently it's a good source and it's the truth. If you go on Black Lives Matter website, which used to say that it's a Marxist organization that is trying to destroy the nuclear family and bring down capitalism because it's exploitation. Freedom equals exploitation. Private business ownership, privately owned homes and property. That's what they don't have in communist countries. Nobody owns anything. That's why when I said on the Horse Racing Nation, I was trying to tell them, Justify is owned by the China Horse Club. It's owned by the Chinese government. This is 2 years ago. There's something strange about this horse. And then I saw that he had the silks of the Chinese flag. And I said, if this horse wins the Triple Crown, and it's in 2018, they are announcing on an American sport that's very hard to win that they've won America. That's the way I saw it. And guess what's happening? As it turns out, that Justify should have been disqualified on his qualifying race at Santa Anita for the Kentucky Derby. Should have never been in the Triple Crown because he was on 300 milligrams of scopolamine, which denotes a human hand rather than them accidentally eating it in the field. It's a weed that grows in poop and tastes awful. So technically, there would be no such thing. The horse would just spit it out. It's baloney. But anyways, as it turned out, the day of the Belmont, George Soros also owned the horse, along with China. And this is how powerful China is. And this is a precursor to this whole BLM and how they're connected with China. This whole thing comes together. That they were removing horses from the Belmont because they didn't want any horse to challenge Justify, to tire him out, so he would win. So they promised to pay the other trainers who were training some of their horses that they owned $25 million if Justify wins. So the other trainers were removing horses. And Justify was hurt, and I think he was hurt when he was doped, because it's a performance enhancer, and it makes you run faster. And I think he was hurt in his qualifying race, because after the Kentucky Derby, Bob Baffert had no idea that Justify was even hurt. And the reporters were just so in awe, and he was talking about it, how he came out perfectly, he was in great shape. And so he pulls them out, and he turns him in tight circles, and the horse is limping and limping. And and Baffert goes, see, he's not even phased. And there's a woman reporter, he's not even phased. And it's like, people, you see, reporters, the media can get so blinded by Baffert, who's the first trainer to train a horse that won the Triple Crown in 37 years, American Pharaoh. So his horses won so many races. But in 2013, 7 of his horses dropped dead in about 10 months' time of heart attacks. He was giving them a thyroid medication, which speeds up your metabolism and makes you lose weight, controls all the hormones of the body. But they let him off on that. So the media can get starry-eyed, and though they see a horse limping, they're still saying he's not even phased. So there's no surprise. See, everything I'm talking about two different things, but there's no surprise that the media is so stupid about this. Make sure the mic is in. Stupid about politics, and they're all bots, and they're all wholly owned by corporations. The same corporations own the media that also own all these big companies, stakes in Hollywood. The whole thing is owned by about 5, let's say, billionaires, trillionaires, huge companies. And they want globalism. They want the borders dissolved. And as the UN said in their 2030 project, which you can look up on the internet, they want the world run the way the communist Chinese government runs their country. If you are against, if you think the wrong way, you're against communism, they put you into work camps or throw you into prison and harvest your organs while you're alive. Well, anyway, excuse me if I pronounce any of these names wrong, but the head, if you look at the head there's 3 people that head BLM. And nobody disputes, and that's the reason why they name themselves Black Lives Matter, because nobody can say, no, that's not true. And people will, unknowing and very ignorant about what this organization is about, hook onto it because, oh, this is a good cause. And believe me, if it really was about saving Black lives, I would be a part of it too. But until you stop Black on Black crime and all those millions of babies that get aborted that are Black, which Planned Parenthood was put into each of these cities, these inner cities, by Margaret Sanger, the head of Planned Parenthood, who used to give speeches to the KKK. It was about eliminating an unwanted population, including poor whites, and of course Republican whites, which the KKK hated too. Only if they knew that, if it was really about that. But the funny thing about that is, or the interesting thing about that is that it was easy to think that, oh, it's possible because there's so many encounters. We see Black men being arrested often, no fathers in the home. So we think that, well, this could be true. There could be more deaths of unarmed Black men or armed Black men, whatever the case may be. This could be true until the Washington Post dug up the truth and found that there were 2.5 times more whites being shot by the police, because a white police officer, when he's shooting at a white person, he doesn't hesitate at all. And they do hesitate when they go to shoot, when they're shooting at a Black person. And Jacob Blake, which is also something that came out recently. I was watching Tim Pool. And I did this over 2 weeks ago. And this past week, I would say maybe 3 weeks ago, this past week, he came out with exactly what I said in my own video about when battered lives mattered. How if he's taking her keys, he's kidnapping those kids. They're her kids. And the fact that they went to protect a Black woman who's being abused, and what if they didn't do that? He was making points that I had made in my video, except nobody watches me. So this is very interesting. Anyway, so if you check on the Black Futures Lab, which is another organization, see, it's Black Lives Matters, Inc., that I keep saying is here to instill Marxists. I've been saying this from the beginning, and Antifa, to change our country over to communism. And they're doing it like communist China. They're doing it exactly the way, the way all of them did it, but particularly like communist China. There was something more, the way they're doing it and pulling down statues and destroying history is so much like the way Mao did things. And Mao called it the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. And they're using this terminology. So I couldn't help but connect the two myself. So Alicia Garza, who is the top dog at the Black Lives Matter, Inc., she also has another group called the Black Futures Lab, which, if you give money to it, goes to the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco. It's going directly to the Chinese government. This particular association was established in 1972, the height of the Cultural Revolution in China. And what they were trying to do, this is what this group is about, was to destroy capitalism, to destroy America, to instill the idea that privately owned anything and freedom is actually exploitation of people. And that's what we're hearing now. That's when we have to destroy capitalism. That's exactly what they're doing. And the destruction of the nuclear family, that's the idea of Marxism. And so, let's see, Igar Quimst is the guy who started it. And let's see what I got here on my complete. In 1972, he's the one who, he's a Marxist who worked with the Chinese Communist government to establish this in San Francisco, of all places. Now, let's see. Okay. You might have heard of Frederick Engels. In 1872, it's the authority, I'm reading the authority on the Marxist Internet Archive, and it says Marxist.org is the name of the website. He wrote and published the work about socialism and the destruction, which is actually communism. I told you that it could have been Dostoevsky, but I don't think it was. No. One of my videos, I mentioned the name, and his name begins with an H, first name H, and the last name begins with an H. And it's almost coming to me. And I read the entire quote about how, it's a long quote, but in it he says that communism is being served to us basically on a silver platter in the glamorous word of socialism. So every time you see socialism, it's not really what you think. It's not this utopia. It's really communism. Okay. So anyway, Frederick Engels hated the nuclear family. That's why he wants its destruction. And that's this whole thing. That's why this is all connected to Black Lives Matter. So, what happened was Black Lives Matter was formed, and it was formed as a front group that wasn't tainted with Chinese communism, the idea of communism. That's why it was created. And the idea of we keep saying it takes a village. This is Marxist thinking because there's no nuclear family. In fact, the guy that I dated that was a communist revolutionary, one of these people, he kept talking about it. I thought he was so crazy and so abusive. And the second I met him, I said, first I started to listen to him. Oh my God, this guy is crazy. Stay away from him. He is really crazy. And then the more I listened to him, I got so afraid of him. I was petrified. It's because of my childhood. There's things and other things. When you're used to this, his speech was so violent and so angry that I was afraid of him. And I would have never have been with him, but I was with him because I was afraid of him. And that's what these people do. They strike terror into your heart, and they petrify you with fear. Even if you don't grow up and live your life being abused. Because there's some time in your life that you may have had an experience of fear or abuse or getting beaten up. And what happens is these people bring that memory back. You don't realize it. You think you've gotten over it. You think it's in your past. You might have even forgotten it. But the fear is still in your body. It's something that hasn't been worked out and might never get worked out. But it brings you back to that when at some point, maybe in your childhood, when you were vulnerable and you were taken advantage of or beaten up and nobody was there to help you and you were left alone. Some kind of situation like that. And we recall this and we get petrified. And then we become submissive to these people rather than just fighting against them and refusing and say, look, no, use the law and arrest them. This issue that we're having in America, if the law is implemented, if the mayors and the governors refuse to let this happen in their states, it won't happen. None of this will happen. And Black Lives Mattering would mean let's go to these cities where lots of drugs are occurring and a lot of crime is happening and they're killing each other and a massacre happens every weekend. And you wonder, the media, the Democrats basically scramble to when there's a mass shooting. And it actually proves to me that then they say, well, we must take guns away, which is the thing that the KKK and Jim Crow South wanted. The Democrat, Jim Crow South, KKK. That's their thing right from the beginning. Take the guns away. Only they can have the guns. Only the Nazis had the guns. Only the communists had the guns. They disarmed the people. Well, it shows to me that the media, the Democratic Party, are truly the racists. Why do I say that? It's because why do they make a big deal? They make this big deal on how, and they just fill the airwaves day after day, this mass shooting happened. And it's usually white people, mostly white people. And that this is the reason why we must take away guns. And the coverage goes on and on and on. And it's awfully sad. Of course it's awfully sad. Adults and children, awfully sad. And you can think of several instances where the FBI should have gotten involved, was informed for almost 20 years about this person. And, I won't even say his name. And they did absolutely nothing. The FBI hasn't been doing their job for an awfully long time. But they will not say a word about the massacres that happen in these inner cities. Like we hear Chicago, and I hear St. Louis is worse, and Baltimore got worse after the Freddie Gray riots, which also turned out to be the police weren't at fault. Eric Gardner was selling Lucy's. There was a law against selling loose cigarettes because of taxes, because the city doesn't get their taxes. And it's very important because they tax cigarettes heavily. And Lucy's are sold because people can't afford a pack. So they go to the South, they buy them cheap, and they sell them. Well, of course, there's no reason. Arresting somebody for selling loose cigarettes is absurd. But the reason why is the police in New York City, most of them are not white, most of them are minorities, ignored the sale of Lucy's all the time because you're not going to arrest somebody for this. So if it was in their hands, they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have arrested him at all. But that morning, it was the mayor and the chief of police, basically you'd say the mayor, and they were all Democrats. And the chief of police basically took orders from the mayor that said, you must arrest people who sell Lucy's. And when you say you're under arrest, the police have to take them in and they have to use any means possible. Several if it takes several officers to bring that person in. Because otherwise, if you say you're under arrest and you just let people go, we have what's happening in America now. Okay. Actually, they're not even saying you're under arrest. They're just letting them do it. And they're arresting people who are sitting outside of churches, or mothers who have asthma, who don't wear a mask, but are still outside and social distancing. Just the law-abiding citizens are being arrested. But in the instance when you have law and order, when you say you're under arrest, go with them. The likelihood is you're not going to get shot, though there are instances, and I can think of a few white people that this has happened to, that nobody rioted for. Nobody. That were just literally tortured and shot, and the police got off completely. So this is not an issue that's just the Black community, it's also the whites. It happens to white people, and it also happens to white people at a larger rate. So it's all our problem. If there's a problem and there's bad cops, it's all our problem. But it's not Black Lives Matter. This is the kind of issue that, that's bad. Trying to get people in the inner cities from shooting each other, from children getting shot, from that 9-year-old boy that was shot by someone of the same race directly at his chest. It wasn't even a stray bullet. And stopping better education and less prison. And that's what Trump is trying to do. That's why he's trying to put more money. He is putting more money into Black colleges and Black schools. And also did the prison reform and opportunity zones. He's really trying to help the Black community, yet they still pump out the lies. And I don't want to go over the lies. But Hillary Clinton wrote, "It Takes a Village." And her mentor was Saul Alinsky, and he was a Marxist. And they are employing the rules that you will read in his book, Rules for Radicals. And he was her mentor. She just loved him. She used to write letters to him all the time. She had some kind of crush on him. So the idea, it takes a village, comes right out of Marxism. And she writes this book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. And when I was talking about that communist revolutionary that got me scared, he's the one who told me that, it's because Africa, the way the tribes are in Africa is the best way that is the way everybody should live. And even forks and knives and spoons are ridiculous. We should all be eating with our hands. Children are raised by all the women in the village. There isn't a husband and wife that raise the child. And that's the better way. And you think, okay, he's really crazy. And then he said some other things that was actually pro-pedophilia. And the way he said it, I don't even want to say the words, how he said it. But it's unbelievable, everything he said. And I thought that this was a fringe group. This was an outlier. And everybody would think that they were crazy and not listen to them. But it's all everything he said is coming to light now. It's almost like, what more can I say? What more can I say? This is something that has been 1972 is when this Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco was instilled here by Marxists in this country by the Chinese government and implemented by Marxists in this country. They worked hand in hand to try, while the Cultural Revolution was at its height in China, to destroy capitalism and freedom here. Because nobody has a right to own anything. And that's what he believed, that he felt he had a right to live here. He just walked right in, and I had to feed him and pay for everything. He felt that it just, nobody had a right to own anything, because obviously he didn't want to use his talents and work for it. Or the freedom to be creative and try to make money on your creativity. And he actually did have some talents in photography. He wasn't bad. I mean, in photography, filming things. He could have, but he'd rather smoke pot all day long. And that's what he did, even when he was at his job, community kind of job. He would go out and smoke pot all day. And I figured it's the pot that's driving him crazy. He's probably tried to smoke. These people, I really do believe a lot of them, smoked pot when they were too young. The brain is not formed till you're 26. It brings out latent schizophrenia, which is what we see in these people. And we didn't know back then. Everybody said, oh, pot is natural because it's a plant, and alcohol is bad because it's not a plant. And it's good for you. It'll never do any harm. But alcohol leaves your body with liquid. And pot stays in your tissues. And if you smoke every day, if you stop, it takes 7 months to get it out of your body. And it causes low fetal birth weight, which causes the brain to be smaller. And even if the father smokes it, it makes the sperm spin around in a circle. I can't help but think that when people just think that, oh, it's okay, they can smoke pot during pregnancy or before they get pregnant, and they don't realize that it's harming the child. And I can't help but think that this might be a contributing factor. Also, at about the same time, birth control in the late 1960s came available. And the hormones which make a woman tell a woman that you're pregnant gets let off in the water system. And now we have issues with people kind of not knowing, like they're not quite sure, they're not quite a man, not quite a woman. This is what he was saying. Some people are 80% heterosexual and 20% homosexual. What does that mean? That means you're bisexual. Okay, so you're bisexual. That it's possible that we've polluted pharmaceuticals. Of course, China has no regulations on poisoning the water from the runoff from the factories. They dump everything in the water, including the plastics, including no regulations on carbon emissions. Now, Russia has no regulations on carbon emissions. Africa, India, Delhi, it's like smoking 50 cigarettes a day. And a bunch of other countries. We're talking about a huge part of the world, much bigger than the Western world, where America, with all Trump and all his faults, we have the lowest carbon emissions rate in the world. The lie is the problem. And I knew the second I heard Obama letting China off the hook. So it's not like a big deal. First of all, you said when you got into office, the seas were gonna lower. So everything should be fine. That's why you bought your $25 million, was it several hundred acre estate on Martha's Vineyard, right on the water. Clearly, because you lowered the seas, so there shouldn't be a problem with carbon emissions at all. But if you let these countries off the hook, this is a fallacy, and then we have to pay more in taxes, and we have to be penalized and use solar and wind power, which creates rolling blackouts. And so does all that smoke from all the wildfires, because it blots out the sun. Because the reason why that happens is the EPA used to regulate every single state, except California decided to have their own EPA. And then they decided that prescribed burnings, which get rid of all this dead wood and things that are dead on the forest floor, and clear cuttings, which is maintenance of the forest. And what you do is you break up the forests so the fire doesn't jump over one to another. They decided that prescribed burnings create too much carbon in the atmosphere, so they didn't do anything. So it's a tinderbox. It's their fault. It's their fault that they have droughts, because he and now you're saying, what does this have to do with Black Lives Matter? Everything. It's the whole thing. The windmills that kill the birds and that they die, they rust very quickly. And so you have a lot of waste. And the solar panels that also burn the birds out of the sky. And these solar and wind power, you can't harness in a battery. And you also, it doesn't produce enough energy to even create one windmill or one solar panel. And the government has to give you subsidies to even buy the solar panels because they're so expensive. And batteries in cars, electricity, to create the battery puts more poisons in the environment and lets off more emissions, toxic emissions, fossil fuel emissions, at once than a fossil fuel gas-powered engine does in 8 years, which it's better if it's let out at a lower rate than it is at once, because the environment can deal with smaller amounts than at once, plus the poison, plus the battery has to go all over the world before to actually create this battery. And that creates you have to use fossil fuels to get it around the world. So the whole world will stop if you have Black Lives Matter. This is all Marxism. This whole thing, we know that. AOC and her Green New Deal. If the Marxists have their way, if Biden, who clearly has dementia, I've worked with elderly people with dementia. I can say I'm not a doctor, but I've worked with these people 24 hours a day, and I can see it. And I can see when it's early onset and the progression. And everything I've seen of Biden, I can say, yes. Okay, yes. I've said before, he is the front, and the person who's going to be running the show is going to be a communist. I said that. I've said that before. If you catch my videos, and I first showed a few months ago when I was deflating atheism, I got this because I said, this guy, China, they're the ones who are running the show. And because Trump tried to get a better deal, so they wouldn't be the powerhouse of the world, right? You would be even. America, it's much better if a non-communist country is the powerhouse of the world, rather than one that has concentration camps and execution bans for people who are against communism. But that's what all these communist regimes did. They executed people who were against communism, and they think nothing of it. So Bill Ayers, Obama's best friend who co-wrote his book, and they would do cocaine together, said that at the time, which was 60s, 70s, during the Vietnam War, he said that 30 million people, and we had about 200 million people in this country, had to be killed to change this country over to Marxism. That's very scary, and it's even scarier that that's the best friend of Obama. Obama, who invited BLM into the White House about 160 times, into the Oval Office. That's scary. And he said that Biden and Bernie are very close in their ideas. What he's saying is that the last election, which Hillary pretty much, thanks to Julian Assange, who's being tortured by Britain every day of his life and his teeth are rotting out of his mouth, let go all this information on Hillary, basically to save the world. He didn't like Trump either, he said, but Hillary was so much worse. And now this man is being sacrificed. Losing my train of thought here, thinking about Julian Assange, which should be an entirely other video, but we must remember what went on in the last election. And the last election, I believe Obama said that Biden and Bernie are the same, which is truth. It's an absolute truth, because he's a Marxist, Obama's a Marxist. This is what he's been trying to do. I knew before he was elected that he would be a tin pot dictator that was going to turn this country into a banana republic. I knew that. Because in the last election, a lot of Bernie supporters, because Bernie was cheated, didn't vote at all. So they lost that progressive vote. So Obama's trying to merge the two, saying they're the same. Your Marxism, you'll have it if you vote for Biden. And also with all these millions of ballots, of these unsolicited ballots going out to people, apparently they're going to these addresses, the wrong addresses, or the names aren't even the names of these people. Military absentee ballots are going to people in the minority communities of New York City, Crown Heights. Instead of going to the people who asked for these absentee ballots. So you're disenfranchising the people, the minority communities who might not vote Democrat because they're waking up, and also the military who definitely mostly go Republican and would go for Trump because he loves the military. He's helping the military. He actually did improve the VA and saved hundreds of thousands of lives and probably millions more. And he is ending wars and bringing our soldiers back, because it kills them every time a flag draped coffin comes back to America. And he has to meet that. And it didn't bother Obama, who dropped more bombs on the Middle East, so many bombs that they ran out of bombs. You can find that article on the internet. And he also, which would say, why is he doing so many things that are anti-Muslim? But the Muslims love him. My Muslim friends love him. Don't they realize this? They don't, because they're not hearing the truth. And also he, what's the word? I'm getting tired. What's the word? When you profile, he profiled Muslims on their religion in court. So he was kind of against Muslims. Also, arresting more journalists and putting them in prison on espionage than any other president, which put the fear into all the media. You say something wrong, you go against Obama, he'll put you in prison. That's communist. That's why Julian Assange was trying to ring the bell to let us know what Obama was doing, what Hillary would be doing, should she continue his type of administration, because he knew she was a Marxist. He knew she would do this, and she would sign the TPP and signing globalism. So I think I've told you all my little notes. I just a few notes on this piece of paper about the proof that BLM is connected to China. As I've been telling you, so I understand that this video is long, but maybe I'll do a part 1 and part 2. It's something you should watch the entire thing of, a lot of good information. And do pass it on, because the only thing I have is word of mouth. And I really need your help. So please like, please subscribe, helps the algorithms. And I appreciate your help. Thank you so much. And please do what you can to save this country. Do vote for this country, and you know who I mean. There's only one choice. Work at the polls, canvass, let people know the truth. Share videos that tell the truth. If you don't think I'm telling the truth, share someone else's video. It's better to save this country. That's more important than me. I'm here to save this country. That's why this channel exists. That's it. And to save the people, and to stay strong, and keep praying. All right. See you next time. Goodbye. And God bless.